In competitive games, when something is banned, it's usually because it's either over-centralizing to the point of reducing the game to one strategy, or it's because it heavily encourages non-interactive gameplay, to the point where the best answer to common situations is to simply do nothing. When both players are aware that waiting for their opponent to commit first is the most effective strategy, neither player has any incentive to actually engage with their opponent or the game. Most games feature systems to create this incentive, such as round timers, corners, or sufficiently powerful offensive tools. Absolver does not have these. It's up to the players to make the implicit agreement to actually play the game. Backwalking breaks this agreement.
If you've been around for the past month or two, or maybe 3, I don't know when this video is coming out, you've heard the discourse about backwalking. You may have seen some discourse either on Reddit or on YouTube, with Red Rain demonstrating why backwalking is, well, in the most charitable phrasing, unengaging. Now, this video is largely adapted from discourse being had among high-level Absolver players, and also a post by June about backwalking in the subreddit. So I'll start this video with the thesis. Optimal play in Absolver means you're never the one to act first. Being that Absolver is substantially neutral heavy, you almost always have more options as the defender than you do as the attacker. As such, it benefits you to be defensive.
Spacing! Damn. Spacing? Nice, got him. Spacing. Got him. Spacing.
There is a contract you can optionally agree to, and it's the same contract that you have when people fight without pulling powers, or sword. Nothing explicitly says you can't use powers or sword, but know that once it's on the table, both players might do it. Absolver is a game where neutral is heavily defender favored. What this means is, if you're acting first out of neutral, assuming there's some distance between you and your opponent, you're probably losing. Anytime that you're attacking or feinting, you cannot defend yourself, and very few moves have the ability to account for this disadvantage. At range, you can feint to bait out a whiff punish and punish it yourself. However, you open yourself up to your opponent simply pressing a slower, more painful button. You have to do 2 things as the aggressor: feint into successful defensive ability, while your opponent only has to do 1, press the right button. Obviously, this isn't an ideal mind game for what you want out of neutral. You can argue that slower and longer reaching moves could close that gap, but your opponent could just have a 12 frame locked and loaded, ready to poke you as you get close enough. So you might be asking, what's the issue though? Other fighting games have been defender favored in neutral and they don't have problems. And that's true. However, in almost every other fighting game, there's something to disincentivize you from being too defensive. Street Fighter 6 has burnout. Guilty Gear has negative penalty or guard crushes. Other games have guard meters, walls, ring outs, what have you. Absolver has pretty much none of these things, except for the stamina bar, and you could argue the cross map too. And that becomes painfully apparent the moment that someone holds their left stick backwards. If both players do this, gameplay simply fails to happen. There's nothing stopping you from indefinitely holding your CT opponent hostage and running around the wrecked boat on the harbor map, or any other map, really. Sprint attack is kind of a joke for actually trying to gap close and start pressure, and stamina for sprinting simply is not a limiting factor for the person running away. You could honor rule it to just using it for footsies, but where's the line? Any really good back unlock allows you to dump almost your entire stamina bar on attacks, regardless of if you're actually creating pressure or not, and then get out relatively risk-free. At that point, why even make decks that have pressure at all? If I care only about winning, and if I care only about securing the win, I can poke you at range and use the advantage of that to escape entirely, risk-free. So that's the thesis, really. It's not about if you can play neutral, but really if you even should attempt to, or more specifically, force your opponent to. The issue with backwalking is that in the worst case, you have 2 people playing joust with like wallop blow, never really engaging and just waiting for their opponent to make the first move. When that opponent makes that move, you're in a very advantageous state. So why even put yourself at a disadvantage? This isn't a video that'll convince anyone to stop backwalking, necessarily, but at least it's an interesting primer on the nature of competitive Absolver and the problems we've come up against. But to wrap up, backwalking is an unengaging tactic. And as a person who has used back unlocks in and out of tournament for years, it is genuinely causing me to reevaluate how I approach Absolver. I know the safety of being able to disengage with an unlock has held back my ability to be comfortable in difficult tournament situations. I know that in spending time close to my opponent while I have low stamina, I can ask myself how I got into that situation. It makes me more aware as a player and leads to more convicted decision making in and out of combat. Backwalking isn't illegal. It's just simply unengaging. It is often a low-risk, get-out-of-jail-free card that makes the game just a little worse. No one can stop you from backwalking. But at the very least, this should serve as a reminder that Absolver's not a perfect game. This is an oversight, and no hype set in the history of competitive Absolver has ever leaned on backwalking. If you were curious as to why people had beef with it, at least now you know. Thanks for watching. The bigger man does not walk away. The bigger man chooses violence.